Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So today's video is going to be my next recent reads wrap up where I have 10 books to talk to you about. So this set of books is pretty positive overall. I had a few that I really loved, so that's exciting. Like always, we'll start at the bottom and work our way up. So the lowest rated book that I have to talk to you about today is a 3-star rating, I guess. And the first book in this rating that I'll talk about is Devolution by Max Brooks. This is a, I guess, horror survival type book where Mount Rainier erupts and there's this town called Green Loop that's supposed to be like really nice, but there's this Green Loop massacre that has occurred. So basically this story is set up like we find the journals of this Green Loop resident, Kate, and this like reproduces her words, and also Max Brooks is supposedly like investigating Bigfoot. We have this survival narrative basically, and there's certainly some horror and this kind of scientific journey about, you know, what actually happened during this Green Loop massacre, and, you know, we know that Bigfoot is real now. For me, this started off really slow and it took me obviously a while to get into it, but once we actually see Bigfoot introduced, it definitely gets a lot more exciting. There's certainly some alarming and gruesome things that occur at times. I generally liked it, like exploring Bigfoot as a creature and a predator in general. I liked the survivalist portion as well. This main character, Kate, who we supposedly have like her journal entries, she certainly does the best she can to survive, and I thought it was interesting to see her kind of develop over the course of the book. She starts off being kind of meek, and then by the end she like, you know, is starting to take charge of things a bit more. I did like some of the side characters as well, one in particular, but we didn't really get to spend that much time exploring all these side characters, so I could have used more certainly about these other side characters. But a lot of these other side characters make some really stupid decisions, so that was a little frustrating at times. The formatting itself, it's obviously like this mix of diary entries, there's some interviews and things like that, kind of similar to World War Z. But not quite. I feel like the diary entries didn't necessarily read like diary entries, it kind of just read like a normal narrative. But yeah, I'm not sure these supposed diary entries really like conveyed the horror of actually being there. So like, this was good. I don't think it was as good for me as World War Z. I have heard though that the audiobook version uses a full cast to narrate, so that sounds really awesome. So I feel like if you do want to read this, you might want to check out the audio version instead of the physical version. The next 3-star book I'll talk about is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. So this comes out July 14th, and I did receive an advance copy of this through the publisher, through Nat Galley, so thank you. So this is an Own Voices story. It's a horror tale about 4 American Indian guys essentially being hunted by this supernatural entity that is seeking revenge for an event from their past. So this was really bizarre. In the first chapter, I could kind of get a sense that the writing style wasn't going to be quite for me. I'm not exactly sure why that is. I feel like maybe it was the tone or something that just like didn't fully mesh with my reading tastes. The pacing, I also struggled with a bit. It took me a little bit to get into it, and then like kind of once I was into it, it then like abruptly shifts who we're focusing on. So the middle portion was a bit not my favorite, I guess. And then by the end, it did pick up again and I got into it a bit more, but like, I don't know, the pacing was just really uneven for me. Specifically in this middle portion, it did drag on a bit and I was bored and didn't really feel as on edge because of the horror as I would have liked. I did really enjoy the culture and traditions of Native Americans that we explore in this book, and obviously there's a bit of commentary on being you know, like an American Indian man, or just like generally a minority culture in America and just how others perceive them. So I did really like that, and I really appreciated that aspect for sure. There's certainly some content warnings here. There are very gruesome depictions of animal death, and you know, like I never really enjoy reading about animal death, but like sometimes I can handle it a bit more, but this one was really uncomfortable to read and I just like didn't really like that, and I feel like that kind of affected my enjoyment as well. And like the characters, I don't feel like anyone really stood out to me, aside from maybe Denora, I think her name is, and we got her towards the end, which was a little unfortunate because I could have spent more time with her. But yeah, so like basically I didn't really connect with any of these characters, so I don't know. Overall, this was a little bit of a disappointment for me because I had much higher hopes, but I do think that others will enjoy this much more, and I would suggest, like, take a look and try to read a sample of perhaps this first chapter and see if this writing style will work for you. Like I said, it didn't necessarily work for me, but I think that this will work well for others. Then we move to the 3.5-star rating, and the only book I'll talk about here is Speak the Ocean by Rebecca Enzor. So this was also this was actually a little bit of a random NetGalley find. I had just been looking at NetGalley for, because I don't know why exactly, because I have like a million books I need to read, but this was, it was available as read now, and I was like, oh, this sounds really interesting. So we basically follow Finn, and he is this mer handler at the Oceanica Marine Park. So we have obviously discovered mer people. The mer in this world are very violent and unpredictable, but they're very popular for the tourists at this marine park. Then we also have another character, Eerie, who is one of these mer people. She gets caught and once she's at this marine park, she sees other mer people who are kind of broken, but she refuses to, be broken herself, I guess. So she learns to speak and communicate with Finn, and he eventually starts to realize that they're actually an intelligent species, and he starts to question the ethics and morality, I guess, of keeping the mer in this marine park. So this was pretty entertaining for the most part. I will say I enjoyed it much more at the beginning, and then kind of as it went on, I lost a little bit of enjoyment. I do feel like it was a little bit too long. I did really like the mer. I thought they kind of reminded me of the creatures in Into the Drowning Deep, where you have, not the nicest depiction of mermaids, mer people. So I certainly liked that. They also turn into sea foam, and that was kind of an interesting aspect, and it's this is kind of why it took so long to discover them, so I thought that was kind of neat. Eerie, this mermaid, I thought was fairly strong, and she's obviously very determined to free herself and others, and I liked that. We also have Niku, who is her dolphin guard, so this is kind of a fun, I guess, kind of symbiotic relationship between the mer people and these dolphins. So Niku is kind of more of a stern character, and obviously wants to protect Eerie. Finn, this mer handler, is kind of a jerk. He eventually does what's right, but I felt like he was pretty narrow-minded and not the most understanding character. And I don't know, I feel like he had a lot of waffling about his beliefs throughout. I didn't particularly love that. I did get really irritated that he constantly calls Eerie sweetheart. It was a little excessive, and this is just kind of a personal pet peeve of mine when authors reuse certain phrases over and over, within the same book and across series. It just stands out to me, and then once I have noticed it, I can't unnotice it, and it just gets to be a little bit too much. There's also a bit of a love triangle here, kind of, and I didn't particularly care for this. I would have preferred that Finn does the things that he does because it's right, not necessarily because he falls in love, I didn't really fully believe that, I guess. There's certainly some predictable plot points as well, but it's a pretty quick read overall, and I did have fun with it. I liked the method that Eerie uses to learn English, though obviously, this was a little bit of an easy pickup for her. I don't know, I feel like it would have taken more than just one night of watching Disney movies to pick up on English, but I thought that was kind of a fun touch. There's certainly some tougher things to read about here, they basically electrocute the mer to subdue them, and there's kind of just a general discussion, I guess, of animal cruelty and just the mer cruelty. And I feel like there's just generally this kind of commentary about keeping an intelligent species and, zoos, aquariums, SeaWorld in general, etc. I feel like this was a fun summer read overall. This was kind of what I was in the mood for, so if this sounds interesting to you, I would suggest checking it out. So now we get into the 4-star range, and the first book I will talk about here is Steel Crow Saga by Paul Krueger. So if you watch my most recent vlog, I kind of talked about this some, and I think this is, unless he changes his actions, this is probably going to be the last time I talk about this book on my channel, but I do want to provide a wrap-up for you and kind of just put everything out there so you can decide for yourself what you want to do. So I did enjoy this book, but there have recently been some accusations made against him, and it's come out kind of that he has been harassing women, among other things. I don't know what has happened there. I think the last thing I saw was that he had deleted his Twitter, and I don't know what is going on with that. But it's kind of a shame because I feel like this book had so many great things going for it, and like I feel like there was a lot of nice representation. So it's really unfortunate that it turns out that the author is not a nice guy. So this is basically like, you know, up at the top, it's kind of like Pokemon combined with Avatar: The Last Airbender. So we have kind of two types of magic, I think, in this world. We have these animal companions, and then there's like this bonding with metal. And we follow four main people. So we have a soldier, a prince, a detective who is secretly a princess, and there's a thief. So their stories intertwine as they essentially unite to try to defeat this unstoppable killer who defies the laws of magic. So like along the way, we have kind of unexpected bonds of friendship and love. So I very much enjoyed this book, but again, I feel like uncomfortable and kind of gross because of what the author has done. I do feel like there's a lot to like here. Obviously, these magical animal companions are great. I really loved this idea in general and just like the bonding process. It definitely felt like Pokemon to me. We have some commentary about like some people believe that this is like these animals are enslaved while others don't, and like I feel like there's a little bit of commentary in the Pokemon games about like whether or not keeping these Pokemon as a trainer is the right thing to do. There's also in here like an actual conversation about like type effectiveness, which I thought was kind of funny, and like that definitely reminded me of Pokemon. This metal pacting was also really interesting. It kind of reminded me somewhat of the Powder Mage series to an extent, in that like, you know, it gives you a little bit of an ability to control metal and like, I don't know, use it for things. The characters were all quite interesting, I thought. They all have various flaws, and they definitely have some reasons to hate each other, but I felt like they all kind of like rose above that because they have these common goals. And you know, I feel like this was kind of like, even though people are different races, you can find like beauty and commonalities with others, and I don't know, I thought that was nice. I think this is generally inspired by like Southeast Asia. I think a lot of the characters were bi or possibly just like generally queer. There's a transgender character. I felt like this was handled pretty well, but obviously like, I don't know, I'm not own voices for that, so I can't necessarily speak for that, but I thought that it felt to me like it was a pretty positive representation. I generally liked all of these main characters. I thought they had different strengths. A few of them are kind of like funny and sarcastic. The plot moves quickly overall, though I will say I did lose some steam at the end. Like this final battle, I like wasn't really invested in it, which was strange. I don't know if I was just distracted or just kind of like, I just need to get this over with. I don't feel like it was the strongest ending necessarily, but it did provide some tidbits on like what could happen next. But I do feel like this could be just totally fine as a standalone. But yeah, so like I'm kind of glad it wasn't a new favorite, I guess, but I am also very sad because like, you know, I would have continued on in this, presumably this is a series, I don't know. But now, you know, like unless the author changes his actions, I'm not necessarily sure that I want to. So anyway, I guess with this is kind of just like you can decide for yourself whether you want to read this or not. And, you know, like I would encourage you to. I think most of the things that I've seen about the author were on Twitter, so I don't know if people necessarily want to get on Twitter to investigate that, but, you know, that is certainly an option if you want to go and explore more of his behavior and make an informed decision. But anyway, the next 4-star book I'll talk about is The Kinder Poison by Natalie May. So fun little tidbit. Ivy saw this and thought it said the Kinder Poseidon, and so he's like, is that a book about Poseidon when he's like a kindergartner? No, it is not. But I thought that was entertaining. So this is a YA fantasy where our main character Zaru is a whisperer, so she can essentially talk to animals. She kind of dreams of bigger things in her life. So then the king announces this crossing, so his heirs must race across the desert, and the first to finish and kill the human sacrifice gets to rule. So Zaru sneaks into the palace to join the party that's happening at the announcement of this crossing, and she essentially gets caught in this feud between the heirs and kind of becomes the human sacrifice, so she must figure out a way to save herself. I thought this was actually had a pretty funny tone at times. Zaru in particular felt quite witty and funny. This is pretty fast-paced, and I generally enjoyed seeing how she gets like entangled in all of this and tries to escape. I think the race itself wasn't as tense as I expected, but it was still enjoyable. There's certainly some plot points about people looking down on others for not having magic or having this like lower magic, kind of like this whisperer. Like, I feel like that would be a fairly useful magic skill to have, but in this world, like, it's not particularly powerful. Zaru obviously like wants to save herself, but she wants to go home and be with her dad because she's worried about him as he's getting older, and I just really liked that. She also has like one of her very close friends that she wants to kind of, you know, reunite with, and I wish we could have spent a little more time interacting with this friend, but you know, perhaps that will come in the next book. In terms of the heirs, I felt like I actually kind of liked them all. They are certainly flawed in their own ways, but I can kind of understand where they're all coming from, which is nice. There's certainly some like pretty tragic stories of various people in here who have different types of magic. I felt for them, I liked them all. There's certainly a bit of a love triangle situation here, but at least I felt like there's chemistry between both potential options, so it wasn't like as terrible as some of the other love triangles I've read. Generally speaking, I feel like this was a plot about like redemption and hope, though there's certainly some like ominous things that happen. I really enjoyed this, and I do want to know what happens next. Also, this cover is just fabulous. The next 4-star book I'll talk about is Death in the Family by Tessa Wegert. So this is a close circle murder mystery. 13 months prior to the events in this book, our main character was abducted by a serial killer. He is working as a police detective in New York. Currently, she has moved to upstate New York to kind of get away from this traumatic past. However, a storm's brewing, so they get a call about a missing guy on this family's private island, so she and her partner arrive to find a blood-soaked scene. So our main character believes it's murder, but her partner thinks that this guy's just missing. And obviously they have to interview everybody while trapped on this island. So this was just like a really fun close circle murder mystery. It definitely kept me guessing. A lot of the family members are kind of not great people, and I feel like they all had their own agenda. So in some sense, this kind of reminded me of Knives Out, where everybody is, you know, like not necessarily the best person, and they all like want things for various reasons. Our main character is really interesting. I liked her a lot. I certainly admire her strength. We get little tidbits throughout the story about her backstory, and I thought that was very intriguing, especially by the end. Like, I need to know more about her. She's obviously like doing the best she can to move on from her life after these understandably very traumatic events, and she starts questioning her ability to, I guess, determine right from wrong, and this felt pretty realistic. I also liked her partner. He seems like a pretty nice guy, even though we don't get to spend that much time with him. In terms of the setting, I thought this felt like pretty atmospheric, and it felt like, you know, the storm is pressing in and they need to solve this mystery. So I would definitely recommend this, and I do want to keep going with the series. The last 4-star book I'll talk about is Unconquerable Sun by Elliott. So I won an advanced copy of this through a giveaway from Twitter, I think from the publisher Tor, and this comes out, I believe, July 7th, so very soon, at least in the US. I think, I was talking to Justine from I Should Read That, and I think she said that this comes out in October in the UK, which is really unfortunate. So this is essentially pitched as a gender-swapped Alexander the Great in space. So we have Princess Sun, who is the daughter of the Queen Marshal, who has kind of like expelled invaders and built up Chaonia as this empire. There are assorted ambassadors and noble houses kind of scheming, and they definitely want Sun to be removed or possibly killed. Our princess must rely on her companions to survive, so that's essentially all I'll say about it. But this was really cool. I liked the princess, but she did feel a bit aloof to me, so I didn't fully connect with her, but she is kind of a badass, so that was nice. So we have 3 different point of view characters. We have the princess, then we have Persephone, who is a cadet, and we get to see her from first person point of view, and she is my favorite of all the characters. And then we have Apama, who is this fiend. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but we'll pretend that I am. And she is this kind of like warrior soldier type person, and her species is kind of, I'm imagining them to be kind of insect-like. I don't know if that's necessarily true. They have an exoskeleton, except this particular character does not, and this kind of like makes the rest of her race look down on her a little bit. But anyway, so Persephone, my favorite character, we learn more about her through the course of the book, but I thought she was pretty clever, and I found her to be the most relatable of all the characters. We have an interesting set of like people in this world. Like I mentioned, there's this like fiend species, and then we also have the Gatoi, and I kind of imagine them as like these berserker super soldiers. Like they have various neuro enhancers and are just like really badass soldiers in general. However, they're kind of controlled by some other groups of people, so that kind of made for some interesting reading. And then, you know, obviously this kind of tension between all these species creates a bit of drama and just like political scheming in general, I guess. I felt like there was some interesting world building. There's also like some sort of like game or talent show throughout the book, and there's like this competition. And so I feel like there's this kind of just like a commentary on like the manipulation of media and like public image. So I thought that was kind of cool. So just like entertaining throughout. And then there's like, I think one of the scenes that stood out to me the most, and I thought this was super neat, they're essentially like racing across the sea, I think, and there's some sea monsters based on Greek mythology, which I thought was just fantastic. I really liked that. Obviously, there's a lot of politics, betrayals, scheming, and just kind of like learning who you can trust. This was pretty engaging overall. There were some pretty awesome space battles, and I would certainly be interested in continuing. So if that sounds interesting to you, I would certainly recommend it. So now we get into the 5-star range. So I'm very pleased about these books. And the first book that I think I will talk about here is The Last Sun by Katie Edwards. So this is the first book in the tarot sequence, and I buddy read this with Kat from Brews and Reviews. So this is an urban fantasy where we follow Rune, who's the heir to the fallen Sun Throne, or Sun Court, and he's hired to find the missing son of Lady Justice. This is like set in New Atlantis. So he goes along with his companion, who's kind of like this bodyguard best friend, and they investigate this missing son, obviously, but along the way kind of unravel some schemes and plots. So they discover a legendary creature who is destroying parts of the city. So this was really great. I don't know why I waited so long to read this. Like, this has been on my want to buy list since it came out, and I don't know why I waited so long to pick it up. That was a mistake. This was amazing. I'm so glad that I read it. You know, I felt like it was very fast paced. There's a whole bunch of exciting moments, and like even in the, I don't know, more like the downtimes, I guess, we get a lot of really interesting developments with the character relationships. So like it kept me engaged throughout the story. There's certainly some darker themes at times. Like there are some content warnings for rape and abuse. I do feel like this is a really cool world. Obviously, like, old Atlantis has fallen, but we have new Atlantis rising. There was, like, some sort of world war, which, like, we don't get a whole bunch of information on right now, but perhaps, like, I'm hoping over the course of the books, you know, we'll learn more about, like, what actually happened. All of these, like, main houses are based on the major arcana from the, like, tarot cards. So I thought that was like a really neat touch. We get an interesting variety of powers here. There's also this like Atlantean aspect situation, and that's really cool and also mildly terrifying. So I'm really excited to learn more about this throughout the books and like kind of get a sense of these other like main houses. There's like these sigils, and these are used as a way to control and release powers. So that was, I don't know, kind of interesting. You have to like charge them up. So that was kind of a different sort of magic than you usually see, I guess. It kind of actually reminded me of, and this was maybe one of the reasons why it kind of reminded me of Dresden. Like, you know, he has his shield bracelet and things like that, and you have to like store up energy and stuff. The characters are amazing here. Rune and his companion, Brand, their bond is just really great. I feel like this is kind of like a different type of love. Like, it's not romantic love, but they're like obviously like very attached to each other and very much care about each other and want to keep each other safe. Rune is certainly a survivor. I thought he, and along with Brand actually, were both like pretty funny and sarcastic. Brand, I think, is more of a no-nonsense type of character. Our love interest is surprisingly sweet and actually like a really great guy, and I just like, I loved their relationship. I really liked obviously this romance here. It's just very lovely, and I thought that this love interest was very understanding of Rune's background and his traumas. I do feel like this was pretty like LGBTQIA plus friendly, and it felt very natural. We also get like assorted magical creatures. This evil creature here was definitely super creepy, so that was great. There's just like a lot of really interesting plot threads here that I just like absolutely need to know what happens. So obviously I highly recommend this, and I just absolutely need to keep reading this series. The next 5-star book I'll talk about is Jade War by Fonda Lee. So this is the sequel to Jade City, which I read before I joined BookTube, and I don't know why I waited so long to read the sequel, but it's fantastic. But I read this with Lena from Sufficiently Advanced Lena. Basically, this is kind of like I don't know, it's an urban fantasy that's kind of like The Godfather, but in this like Asian type setting. So we have this like island nation, and the Call family, who is our main family, they're trying to control the capital and this jade supply. So in this world, we have this bioenergetic jade that gives people who can control it kind of like supernatural powers. War is brewing from, beyond the borders. We have foreign governments and criminal kingpins trying to get jade and like control it, and the Calls must form new alliances and fight enemies both in the streets and politically. And they just like need to do this in order to survive. So this was amazing. There are obviously like so many things going on here. There's a whole bunch of shocking moments and just like really tense things happening. I definitely felt worried for our characters, which was just like really fun. I guess it's cool to expand past just the city of Janloon, which I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but that's like that was most of the focus of the first book. So we obviously like go beyond that. We get scenes in Espana where one of our characters goes and kind of like gets accustomed to this new life and just like is generally like originally feeling out of place. But we get to see the Kekanese community and just like how culture and traditions are similar, but have also, or some of them are similar, but some of them have changed based on this new setting. So that was just really cool. We got a lot of new intrigue with all these new groups. So that was neat. The characters are still great. I still continue to like Shay, Andon, and Win. Shay has some pretty badass moments here. I like how she uses her intellect and her position, but also there's some things that happened with her character here that were just like, oh my god, it was great. Win, she is more of like a quiet character, but family is really important to her, and like even though she doesn't necessarily have the same abilities or like isn't really in the same position as some of the other members in this family, she still tries to do everything possible to, save her family and, contribute and protect them, I guess. And then I thought it was nice to see his character growth, and I really want to know what happens next with him. Hilo is not my favorite character, and like that's true of the first book as well, but he certainly like makes some really questionable decisions here, but I can understand where he's coming from, and it was nice to see in this book like how devoted he is to his family. And just like in terms of the jade itself, this is still a really cool idea, and I like how you can have different like techniques and skills to use it. So yeah, I loved this. I really want to know what happens next. I'm not sure. I think the next book is called Jade's Legacy, and I think it comes out maybe next year. I'm not entirely sure, but I really want to read it. So yeah, this is a fantastic series, and I highly recommend it. The last 5-star book that I'll talk about today is Bird Box by Josh Malerman. So this is a horror / thriller, I guess, where something, when seen, causes people to kind of like go crazy and kill others and then themselves. So 5 years after this has started happening, we follow Mallory and her children as they must journey blindfolded down the river to safety. We do have multiple timelines here. We get to kind of see like as this strange occurrence starts happening and just like some of the early years, and then obviously like 5 years later as Mallory is trying to take her children down the river. So this was obviously very intense. I read this in one sitting. It's certainly quite scary and like really creepy at times, and like, just the thought of having to do things blindfolded, and just like the thought of like, you don't know what it is that people are seeing and like why this is happening. Like, that's just so creepy. You know, it is kind of crazy to watch some people kind of descend in madness, and just generally they obviously have to do some like fairly risky things to try to survive. Mallory, you know, she's kind of harsh towards her children, but she's trying to do her best to keep them alive, and like has to do some of these things so that they actually do survive. There's a bit of like this found family element, but it, like, generally speaking, this book just kind of goes off the rails. It is crazy and intense. I do think this may be a little unsatisfying to readers because you don't get all of the answers. But I do feel like everything that we got felt very fitting to the book, and I'm satisfied with where it ends up, and just like, you know, what we get the answers to and what we don't. Do you think the sequel Mallory comes out this month, possibly? And I know Amber from Books of Amber didn't really love it, but I'm also kind of intrigued, like, where it could go after this. But also I'm like, does it really, do I need more in this world, or am I satisfied with this? I don't know. So I may or may not pick up that book, and I also may or may not watch the movie. I do think that the movie is a little bit different from the book, but I'm kind of curious still. So those are the 10 books that I had to talk to you about today. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or think you might pick them up. For your question of the day, let's go with, do you enjoy reading books kind of about cryptozoology? Obviously, while I didn't love Devolution, I still really liked this whole like exploring Bigfoot as a creature concept. So yeah, obviously I personally enjoy reading books about cryptozoology. But I hope you're having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, as that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.